Thank you, Tom. Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Housing and Communities Select Committee. My name is Councillor Kasim Ali. I'm the chair of the Select Committee. This meeting is being held here in accordance with the governmental regulation on holding virtual meetings. So please do bear with us if we run into some difficulties if we run into some technical challenge during this meeting. This meeting is also being held live by Microsoft Teams live conferencing, and the committee members, council officers, and the parties who wish to participate at the hearing this meeting are joining us from remote locations. The event is also being held here on live stream, and on YouTube, and the members of the public, the media, are welcome to watch the meeting remotely and listen to the discussion as it's taking place. This is like no other meeting we had before the Housing and Community Select Committee. This meeting is taking place during a pre-election period, and I will be reminding quite a lot about this point. We, the council officers and councillors and the council officers, should not be seen or cannot be seen that we're using public money to influence the outcome of an election that's happening. Likewise, we will not allow members of the public to speak on issues that will or can be seen influencing the outcome of the election. So I would like to remind everyone, that is including councillors and council officers and the members of the public who will be speaking this evening, not to speak events or issues that directly related to the elections that's happening or by next month. I will be repeating this quite a lot, and I hope that members of the of this committee and everyone that will be speaking will listen if I keep saying this too. And so to avoid that, I would hope that no one will be able to mention those issues. I also like to welcome the first-time viewers of the Housing and Community Select Committee. And to start with our meeting, it's fairly to talk about and to mention the Grenfell tragedy that's happened in our borough, and that is housing-related issue. So we will start to be silent for 72 seconds to remember those who we have lost as members of our communities. So officers will count to the minutes, seconds, and will let us know when the time is up. And the time starts right now.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before we proceed our meetings, I would like to ask members of the committee to mute their microphones and unmute during the meetings. Also, likewise to save the bandwidth, please do councillors and anyone else who will be speaking at the moment at the meeting to switch on their cameras when they are speaking, and also switch it off when they are not speaking. If a councillor wishes to speak on the particular item of the agenda that has not been called for, please indicate by using the raise hand icon on the Teams, drawing to my attention so that you can speak up. To assist fellow councillors, officers, and the members of the public who are watching this event online, please identify so that they can identify you. Please identify yourself and start with your name before you speak, and if necessary, organization that you are representing. If for whatever reason or for however reason the connection drops out, I would like to nominate my Vice Chair, Councillor Greg Hammond, to continue this meeting as the chair of this meeting. And if, for whatever reason, for the unfortunate events that both of us disconnected and don't have a connection, I would like to nominate Councillor Mo Bakhtia to chair the meeting. Now we are coming to the point of attendance and declaration of interest. I'll start myself. I'm here and nothing to declare. And also, I would like to start with Councillor Hamish Adorian. Councillor Hamish Adorian.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Councillor Hamish Adorian. I just have one non-pecuniary declaration of interest. I've been recently working with the lead member for communities on a project related to voluntary sector funding in the borough, and even though I haven't had any direct involvement in such in anything we're discussing today, I still think it would be appropriate to recuse myself from any agenda items relating to her portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamish Adorian, for doing that. Councillor Mohammed Bakhtia.
Nothing to declare, Chair. Present. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tom Bennett.
Yep. Good evening, everyone. Tom Bennett here, Councillor for Redcliffe Ward. Nothing to declare, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Robert Freeman.
Nothing to declare, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Greg Hammond.
Yeah, present, Chair, and nothing to declare.
Thank you. And finally, last but not the least, Councillor Dory Schmatzling.
Good evening, everybody. Yeah, this is Councillor Dory Schmetterling, Councillor for Pembridge Ward, and I have nothing to declare.
Thank you all. Thank you. And for you, present, which I one of the I'm sure my select committee members will agree on this. Since we don't have any absence, we move, and we also have interest. We now are moving to A3. That is minutes for the previous select committee meeting that took place on the 9th of February 2021, and the minutes have been circulated. I believe there has been one correction mentioned by Councillor Greg Hammond, and I will welcome any other councillor who wishes to amend as the minutes has been suggested. Councillor Greg Hammond.
Thanks very much, Chair. This is a really small point, but the third paragraph of the record of item A4, which referred to the conference we held in February as a working group with the housing associations and the council. It was actually 6 of the 11 housing associations that attended the conference on the 12th of February, not what was stated in the minutes. And that was it.
Thank you. And any other amendment or any other corrections? Councillor Doris Schmatzling.
Thank you. Just a point, in case anybody's watching, a spelling correction in the name of the representative from the KNC Food Bank will be produced. Its surname is Yard, Y-A-R-D-E. Just want to mention it in case anyone's watching. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other corrections for the meeting, for the minutes? Thank you. I take your silence as agreed, and we will sign the corrected minutes after the amendments that has just been suggested. Now we're moving to A4, Grenfell related issues. I would like to say a few words about before this item is being discussed. This committee is for the Housing and Communities Select Committee. Therefore, we may not, probably we will not be able to answer all Grenfell related issues. As we know, we don't have a Grenfell Scrutiny Committee as it stands on its own, so we cannot answer all the Grenfell related issues. So if anyone wants to ask questions that are not related to the housing and communities, I warn you in advance, we will not be able to answer, and the officers as well as the lead members have the right to say so. So please don't expect us to answer or to ask or to scrutinize anything but housing and communities. As you have seen, and I'm sure most of you have read the reports, there are 2 reports, Grenfell A4, Grenfell related housing issues, and another one, Grenfell wider community projects. I would like to take these 2 items together, and I would like to call first Councillor Tim Taylor Smith, and then second Councillor Anne Saran, followed by Councillor Judith Lakeman. The reason I do this, and also residents of the RA, the chair of the RA Lancaster West, Abbas, and Samia. The reason I would like speakers to speak first and take 2 items together they are related. I would not want to take one item and then come back to another item, and some people may want to ask questions relating to whether the housing or the wider community. So I will take the two lead members first, followed by the other speakers, and then we will come to the select committee members to ask questions and to scrutinize, followed by any other questions that we may have. So if I may call Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith, the lead member for housing, to speak first on housing-related issues. Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as the paper A4 says, that it has two recommendations, and I just really wanted to cover a brief summary on the two. I'll take the second one first, which is the report provides an update on the Grenfell Re-Housing situation, which in simple terms is out of the 201 households from the Tower and the Walk, 3 have yet to move into their new home and 3 have yet to select their new home. And on the wider estate, 13 are still in private rental accommodation. And obviously we will continue to support them in finding a new permanent home. The main part of the report is really relating to the Grenfell Legacy Fund and a focus on very much the council's role as a landlord. And in discussion with our residents, it was felt very important to mark this legacy fund locally. And by locally, we mean specifically the Nottingdale ward. And residents will be designing the criteria that we'll be using to assess the applications to this fund. And this is now underway with a survey which is going out. And residents will be designing the criteria that we'll be using to assess the applications, as they say. In paragraph 5.5, there's a simple summary there of some of the criteria that we've suggested to help to get the ball rolling. And these include looking at sustainability, employment opportunities, inclusion and accessibility, community safety, and ensuring that residents have a voice. So, I mean, in summary, we really must seek to make sure that there are positive outcomes from the tragedy of Grenfell, and that bringing the community together and establishing a legacy fund is intended to do just that. So actually what I will do is I'll pass over to officers just to see if there's anything they wish to add to the report before you obviously open it up to other comments.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor-Smith. And any officer you wish to call, I will be happy to speak.
I know Dan is on the call. Dan, would you like to talk a little bit about the Legacy Fund?
Yeah, so I'm Dan Hawthorne, Exec Director for Housing and Social Investment. So actually the only thing I'd add is to mention the other project that's mentioned in the report, which is the work we're doing. So alongside the Legacy Fund, which, as Councillor Taylor-Smith has said, is focused on our role as the council's role as a landlord. There is this other project which is getting underway, probably fair to say, a bit behind the Legacy project in terms of its development so far, but on focusing more on the council's role as a kind of broader housing authority, which is looking at the lessons that we can learn from the tragedy and the council's response to the tragedy in relation to the way that we the way that we work with households to allocate them to a home, whether that's a council home or a social rented home owned by a housing association. And that's deliberately timed in such a way that it will be the outcome of that work will be able to inform the review of our broader allocation scheme, which is coming forward later in the coming months. So that's kind of sits alongside as a complementary piece, if you like, to the Legacy Fund, which is very much kind of geographically focused and focused on those properties for which we're landlords in Nottingdale.
Thank you. Any other officers you wish to, Councillor Taylor-Smith, to speak?
No, unless any are volunteering.
Thank you. That will do. If I may call now Councillor Anne Saran to speak to her paper. That was brief and short. Thank you, Councillor Taylor-Smith and Dan, officer, for your contribution. Councillor Anne Saran, if you are here, please, the floor is yours.
I'm here, Kasim, and thank you to the whole committee for giving me and the Director of Communities the opportunity to speak with you today about community engagement, and in particular how we have engaged and how we are engaging with the wider Grenfell affected community. So you will all be aware that in January 2019, the Council agreed a strategy to support the long-term recovery of affected by the Grenfell tragedy, including survivors and the bereaved and the members of the wider community. A significant part of this strategy focused on ensuring that, and I'm quoting here from it, communities in the surrounding area feel their voices heard and that they can access the services that they need. And a big part of all this work is about developing community capacity and resilience for the future. And really, I would say that new ways of working and listening to our residents must be a legacy of the Grenfell tragedy. So this paper focuses particularly on the Grenfell Assembly, the Project Fund, and the Community Leadership Programme, and how we have worked with and engaged with residents on these programmes. I think it's also important that we think about resident engagement across the borough and the whole council. We've worked well, I think, with residents post-Grenfell in some areas, and these lessons must be applied across the council. And for me, working to better solutions, not to mention that it's fair and the way that we should be working here at the council. I do think generally we need to look at engagement with residents in new ways. I mean, I think it's a lot better than it was, but many people don't want to fill out surveys and they want to engage with the council on their terms in environments of their choosing. And we need to get better, I think, in responding to this and finding more varied ways of reaching residents. And that's not to say that we haven't made good progress with this. The Grenfell work describes here, I think it starts to demonstrate how we're doing this. The Grenfell Project Fund, whether or not people agree with how it was done, and there are definitely mixed views on this, at least it was different, and it aimed to put decisions into the hands of local people, and involving local people in the design and running of the Grenfell Assembly might be another example of this. Consultation, as you'll see in this paper, has just been completed for the next Grenfell Project Fund co-design. This has also involved a community advisory group to help co-design the process. I think it's one big lesson for me, actually, on all these co-designs that we've done, is that it is how we want to work with residents, but it does take time, and it takes more time. Which is kind of understandable because you're really trying to work with people and go at the pace that they want to go at. So I think it's important to understand that as we think about co-design in more areas of the council. And just a couple of other points I wanted to make before I asked Tunde to describe the detail of the engagement on each programme. And the first of these is to say that COVID has really impacted everything we are doing, obviously, and it's not meant as an excuse, but Zoom is not a great mechanism for engaging with anyone. And we need to be out in the community, getting to know people in real life. And I just feel there's been a lot of disruption, and I feel we've done the best we can under the circumstances. But I really hope as restrictions start to lift, we can see engagement really happening for real in person. And the other point I really want to make here is that we have many partners who engage with our communities, and particularly with our North Kensington communities. And much of this engagement is built on the ground and through relationships. And that's always the best way to do it. It's actually the only way I know how to build trust and get to know people. And there are good examples of the NHS doing some really interesting engagement through community connectors, and obviously the VCS, build relationships and reach communities in ways which I think the council can't. We also have community champions and COVID champions in public health, and we really need to connect all these agencies and organisations up so we don't replicate what we're all doing. And we can build networks which support all our communities and which we can all learn from each other. So those were just my kind of opening observations on the paper. But I did want to ask if Tunde could please give a little bit more detail about each of the three programmes that we've been working on, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Yes, please. Yes, Tunde, welcome.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee members. My name is Tunde Alayinka, and I'm the Director for Communities. I'll just add a little, as Councillor Siren said, a little bit of more detail. In relation to the Grenfell Assembly, the paper describes that it's a discursive forum for Grenfell community members to discuss the issues that matter to them and to give us within the council a bit of a steer as to how they want us to represent their views and progress some of the things that that need fixing. So much of the discussions of the Grenfell Assembly are based on trying to reach consensus. Attendance has fluctuated, and as Councillor Siren said, Zoom isn't the best format during lockdown, but it was the best format that we had, so we worked our way through that. We've had 5 to date, and our future work on the Grenfell Assembly, as Councillor Siren said, is to speak to community members and see how much they would like to be involved in actually running and facilitating the assembly with our support. We had one assembly that was run by young people, the Youth Council, and that was very well received and run really well despite some of the issues that might have happened during the meeting. The Grenfell Projects Fund and the Community Leadership Programme, in terms of how we've engaged on their future design, there was a dedicated assembly. I believe the November assembly was dedicated to the Grenfell Project Fund. From that, we had lots of steers as to how the programme can improve for year 2. From those steers, we've sent out invitations to many community members who said that they wanted to get involved, either at the assembly or through our normal sort of engagement conversations, and they've formed an informal advisory group who've been working very closely with officers. And I give my apologies for Sanjay Green, our head of community participation. She's ill at the moment, so she's unable to come to this meeting, but I do have Kevin Ramsey, who's the manager of the Grenfell team, here as well. As Councillor Siren has said, the insights from this group helped us to pose what questions we were going to ask in the survey, the consultation survey, which closed on the 9th of April. I'm happy to share some of the preliminary results with the committee and with members of the community who are watching this. But there was a strong, just to sum up, there was a very strong steer towards forming a resident-led panel. And using this panel to not only help decide which programs and courses get funded, but also to play a part in monitoring and governance. Looking at the future, we want to discuss work with our. We want to widen participation so that we're reaching some of the seldom heard voices. We envisage a lot of this work will be working in partnership with the VCS. Our VCS colleagues who have that community reach, but also with our faith communities. And as Councillor Siren said, we envisage and look forward to more face-to-face engagement and less digital-based engagement. So I will pause there.
Thank you. Thank you both for your time and coming to this meeting, and also the reports. Just to summarize of the main points that both lead members and the officers have mentioned this evening's report about the rehousing of Grenfell. As we currently know, 3 people have yet to choose, have chosen have chosen their permanent properties, but they are yet to move. 3 have yet to select their final properties, and 13 are in TA accommodation. That's a temporary accommodation. So that the number stands as we speak, including those 3 and 3 plus 13. So 16. We have here 16, 19 as we speak. So if we have, if I were to ask a question, the numbers that we have just has been raised here, 3 and 3 and 13. Yet to be officially rehoused to the permanent positions, and hopefully there will be questions coming from. And the other point was the legacy fund. So the legacy fund, and that has been mentioned, then near or where the disaster has happened, that's in Nottingdale ward, where Grenfell was and is still. That's another important point that has been mentioned. In terms of the Ansaran and the community's membership, the community lead member for residents engagement, Grenfell Assembly and the co-design, as well as COVID-19 impact on the engagement, as well as working with partners and to engage with partners such as the NHS, FCS and the faith communities, as well as community champions and residents-led panel. I think that would be the summary of the two main speakers. And if we were to come back to now other speakers, again, I remind you, this is a pre-election time. We will ask councillors, select committee members and councillors, as well as residents who to speak this evening to hello, can everyone hear me? Somehow I was on hold.
Yeah, you've just come back, Chair.
Thank you.
I think you nearly finished there. I was just getting a bit worried.
No, that's absolutely fine. I think my laptop said to me, you're on hold. Something went wrong. Wait for it. So I don't know what went wrong, but I was on hold for a couple of seconds. But now we are good to be back. Now I would like to invite to speak Councillor Judith Blakeman, who is a long-term serving councillor, and thank you for your service. And Councillor Blakeman, please, as a resident and the elected councillor for Nottingdale, where the disaster happened, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can indeed.
Yes, sorry, Judith Blakeman, Nottingdale Ward Councillor. I really want to concentrate more on paper A5, which is the wider communities project, because there is still a huge amount of distrust amongst the local communities. The Community Assembly, in my view, and I've attended all of them so far, has only had one good meeting, and that was organised by the Youth Council. The others, the attendance was very, very poor, so I don't quite see how that meeting can be used as the voice of the community. I am a local resident, and my neighbours and I live within 250 metres of Grenfell Tower. But as a local resident, I have not been consulted at all about any of these, and nor have my neighbours. So I don't understand this proposal to create a Grenfell Community Assembly steering group with an unknown membership, because I still think that there is no ability for the wider Grenfell communities to contribute through the forum of the Assembly. You refer to a Grenfell Community Advisory Group, so residents have not heard of this, so what is it? You've referred to 2 online surveys, again residents have not heard of this. Door-to-door engagement would be welcome so long as it actually does involve door-to-door engagement. I am concerned that I had understood that the council was going to go beyond using the voluntary sector as a proxy for local communities, but listening to Councillor Siren, it seems as though we've reverted to that. The projects fund, well, the projects were selected by participatory voting, and what happened was that the projects went to the most articulate and to those who were better known, and I think that there were other people left out of this. But some of the projects that could happen have now run into the ground because there's no sustainable funding available. And I would quote as an example Swim Unity, which had to close down. Fortunately, it's now got further funding from the Evening Standard Grenfell Fund, but I was wondering what has happened to other excellent projects that had the funding from the project fund. The funding's run out, and what has happened to them now? On the housing paper, I think that the Bramley House Residents Association doesn't seem to have been listened to, but I think Samia may well speak more about that than I can. The Henry Dickens Court Residents Association have suggested that instead of the participatory budget proposal that's being proposed, there should be a small forum to meet and interpret and translate the results of the Grenfell Housing Legacy Funds to enable transparency. And again, they think that will address some of the mistrust which exists at the moment. Yeah, I mean, the virtual nature of most committee meetings precludes public contributions other than this committee, and I don't think this is acceptable at all. And yeah, I mean, I heard this morning through a resident's tweet about a drop-in tomorrow at Wainfleet Square, but otherwise I would have been entirely ignorant of this, and I am concerned that the council is not engaging with the elected ward councillors for Nottingdale Ward. And I think that's really all I want to say, because I only got the papers for this committee on Saturday, and I really haven't had a chance to sort of digest them properly. Thank you, Chair.
Many thanks, Councillor Judith Blakeman, for your talk, and hopefully notes have been made by the relevant lead members. And just to summarise, that you feel as the residents have not been consulted and you live within 250 metres of the Grenfell. Some of the important projects have not been funded, or funding has run out, but thanks to other funding sources, like Swim Unity and others have now been helped. But you also feel that local councillors have not been contacted by the council or the council leaders, and I think the relevant teams will be responding to this. I will open for the discussion after the two speakers for these two items. So I will now like to call residents and the chair of the Lancaster West, Abbas. If you are online, Abbas, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Abbas Dadu from Lancaster West Estate. Yes, I hear Judith, and I agree with some part of what Judith said. But at the same time, to be fair to RBKC, even we shared many times on our website and the WhatsApps and other platforms we have with residents to participate and join, but unfortunately, due to the fatigue, people have been consulted too many times for so long. I think that's one of the reasons the participation is very low. And also, I would appreciate if some of those Zoom meetings, which was poorly attended, I remember the first one I counted more than half of people on that Zoom meeting, they were RBKC members, either councillors or officers, and still it was announced as a successful turnout, which wasn't, and it's not their fault, you know, and you know, at the same time they are trying to advertise, but you know, the figures should be presented to people with facts and reality, not pretending it was good. You need to admit it wasn't good, but we did our best, or suggest us what else can be done. I think in terms of having different committees, I think it's fair residents to know who are in these committees, on what basis they've been selected, or what's the way to be nominated to be on those committees if residents want to participate and be part of that and feed in their ideas. It should be available to everybody, so it shouldn't become some sort of, like, I don't know, secret society or anything. At the end of the day, that's for everyone, and I think the best way to go forward is consensus. So send a consultation to everybody. Whoever wants to engage, they should respond, and if they don't want to respond, it's nobody's fault. Everybody received the consultation. That's from me. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Abbas, as the chair, and we appreciate for the work that you do for the local communities. I would now like to call for the last speaker on these two items, Samia, and apologies for mispronouncing your name earlier. I think the Ramadan is getting to me. So Samia, if you are here, please, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Dear Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Thank you for inviting us to join the meeting this evening. I won't be too long. I've submitted a paper. I don't know if everyone has had an opportunity to read. I'm not too sure whether this share screen is available, but I'm going to try and summarize as best as I can. Thank you again for inviting the space to attend the last meeting. I just wanted to have to say something about that. We're pleased to have seen some progress, but there's still some work to do. And very briefly, so there's no confusion in my capacity this evening. I'm just going to talk about the remit of my presence this evening. So I'm here on behalf of the space that was set up after the fire. And the reason why I'm here is because we provide housing information advice at generalist and specialist caseworker level and work with shelter. So in the last 3.5 years, we've dealt with different type of cases through housing needs, from suitability of accommodation to the LLP for Lancaster West and Bramley House, the wider Grenfell Re-Housing policy, and under housing management, disrepair, transfer, ASB, etc., and cases with other major housing association. So in that capacity, we're able to we've reviewed the papers and analyzed the papers, and this is what we have to say this evening. We came across recently about a case of an 85-year-old tenant, RBKC tenant, who was given 5 days notice to vacate the property, and who was told, and who signed an agreement under duress, was told by the officer that if the tenant refused to sign, RBKC would take legal action. That's not a case, that's not an isolated case. We've had different cases with the same attitude. And while we talk about engagement, I think we don't talk about culture and we don't talk about cultural change. And don't get me wrong, there's some officers who work really hard, but in organization, there's what we call informal part of an organization. And the informal part of RBKC is hindering progress. And informal organization are defined but not limited to behaviors of officer and organizational culture. And culture in this case is historic contempt. And in the last 3.5 years, we keep coming across situations where residents are treated with contempt, and this should not be the case. And every resident deserves a high standard of housing service, and we've got lots of outstanding cases where we can't seem to find a resolution. I mean, the last example I can quote, without naming anyone, is an officer commenting that the tenant was getting under his skin. That shouldn't happen.
If you don't mind, allow me to please say we will not be able to. Of course, you haven't mentioned any names, and I expected that you would not mention any names.
No, not at all.
If there's any particular issues, please do take it to the individual councillors. But if there's a wider issue, like the change of the culture change of the council, we would like to listen. Yeah. Thank you. We would like to listen to that.
I'm coming to that, but the reason why I use this as case study is that we should have escalation routes that work. We shouldn't have to come to your committee to have issues being raised. That we shouldn't have to go to our local councillors. So there should be something within our BKC and a will to resolve situation. So I'm going to go back to wider issue. And what I'd like RBKC to confirm is what the policy is in terms of giving notice, because it's not the first time that 5 days notice has been given to a tenant to vacate a property. It's unreasonable, and I'd like somebody to look into that. And talking about lessons learned, let alone creating a legacy, is premature. What we haven't seen is the culture change impact framework 3.5 years later. And what this authority needs to do, it needs to first unfreeze, it needs to let go. And cultural change implies unlearning ways of thinking and working. So I just wanted to make the point that we keep on hearing about lessons being learned, but the first stage in changing is unlearning, and this hasn't happened.
Thank you. If you don't mind, could you sum up in about 1 minute, please?
Yeah, I'm going to conclude. In conclusion, we submit that this committee has a duty dictated by the Nolan Principles to act for its inhabitants. Our community is nowhere near recovery from the worst disaster in recent British history. At the very least, change is owed to this community. While we understand that change takes time, the committee should recommend monitoring and scrutinizing the progress towards change, including with community participation and overview. Unless a system that picks up local issues and auto-corrects itself, contempt will still exist and residents will continue to be excluded from services and will be treated the way we described above. Unless you adopt our recommendations here, given here, we will continue to have no voice. And a very last note, because I know other representative for Bramley House, I think Councillor Blakeman has summed up what the position is for Bramley House. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much for the work you do for the local community. And just to summarize for your points as well as Abbas's point, Abbas mentioned the importance of having residents actually in the meeting rather than RBKC councillors or RBKC officers as the majority of the attendees of consultations, and that point has been made, and of course relevant council lead members will respond to that. And no secret meetings for chosen individuals, that point has been raised by both Councillor Judith Blakeman as well as Abbas.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, yeah. Very briefly, can I ask for an action for officers to, I'm happy to circulate our paper to officers. As an action point, could officer come back to us and also come back to us about unresolved cases?
I will come to that point. I was actually referring to that in specific cases. If there is an issue for the local, this is a local ward councillor related issues. If, however, the local ward councillor councillors maybe both cannot deal with, or 3 councillors cannot deal with it, then it's reached to the scrutiny level where we can actually talk about it. But I would highly recommend, if the local councillors that are dealing with these issues have not seen their specific caseworks, then please do get in touch with us, and we will get in touch the relevant teams as a on behalf of the scrutiny teams. But first, your first point will be the local councillors. And again, you've mentioned the escalation routes, and I think that just answers what I have said. If the local councillors cannot take on the local issues, or at least cannot deal with it, or there are some issues with the local council and the officers, then it reaches to the scrutiny team, and we can look into it and hopefully hold accountable to the relevant lead members, whether it's housing or communities, for this select committee. And finally, you've also mentioned the 5-day rule, and I think the 5 days notice policy. I hope the lead member will or the relevant officer will respond to that. And for your information, Sami, I came across residents who have been given 5 or within a week, within 5 working days, which counts as a week, to move, and that residents couldn't do that. I personally got in touch with the relevant officers, and we've managed to extend that time. So I'm sure this can be done if local councillors have contact to the officers or the senior officers of the council, and it has been done before. And that Goldring, of course, who I hope is here this evening, will say yes to that, because I contacted him and his team, and that has been extended to actually 2 weeks for that individual to move for where he was, and it was a Grenfell related issue that I was able to deal with personally. So that can be done and can be arranged. So the 5-day rule or the 5-day notice will be answered. And that concludes the in terms of the questions and the speech. Sorry, not the question, speech for the from the lead members as well as other 3 guests. Now I would like to open the platform to the select committee members. Lead members have the opportunity to answer questions that has been raised by the other speakers, the other 3 speakers. So if you have the opportunity to answer both from the select committee as well as the attendees, will be appreciated. The first person who put his hand up was Councillor Mo Bakhtia. Although you put it down, you put it up again, so I'll take that as your first, and then followed by Councillor Freeman. Councillor Mo Bakhtia.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, my question is for Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith. We had cases when we were allocating houses and accommodation for Grenfell survivors. In case of new build, you are not allowed to have parking spaces, is not permitted. Some residents moved to these places and they didn't know about this. They were very unhappy. I would like to know what happened to these residents. I think I referred 2 cases to yourself. How did we manage to resolve this issue, please?
Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith.
Yes, thank you, Mo, for your question. So yes, this related really to the properties that are on Warwick Road, which, because they're new build in common with all new builds, they do not come with a car parking space. As far as and we believe that was made actually quite clear at the time. There was clearly, I accept that obviously that what residents are saying that they were unaware of this. It is something which has gone through to appeal and has been considered. And the view was that the council acted correctly. Having said that, what we have done with the residents is that we've said that we're very happy that we obviously support them in a move and a relocation to another home, and they keep their priority in the number of points that they have to do that. Or alternatively, there was a suggestion of a payment in terms of compensation for not having a car parking space. It's something which I discussed with our planning. The problem is that we are not in a position that we can go against what planning says, because if you start making exceptions where we've granted planning on the basis of no residence parking permits and then we start granting them, that does actually open us up to challenge. So, I mean, I'm very sorry as far as the individuals are concerned. I'm aware of the cases, but that decision was made.
Well, thank you for the comment, but I think this is unique case, very exceptional. We have Grenfell. We should allow this.
These weren't the Grenfell. Can I just stop you? Just say anybody related to Grenfell know that we were able to give spaces specifically for that specific need, but the cases where they haven't been given places aren't Grenfell related.
Okay.
So the Grenfell related, just to clarify, the Grenfell related has been taken exceptional, and other. Okay, thank you for your answer.
Okay,
Councillor Robert Freeman. Councillor Freeman.
Sorry, I'm just unmuting myself.
Thank you. Take your time.
I wonder if I could ask, it's really both lead members, what outcomes are we looking for? Because there's all sorts of very interesting actions and questions and so forth in these heritage papers. But what outcomes are we looking for? Because unless you are absolutely clear on what outcomes you're seeking, it makes the activity rather disjointed.
Any of the lead members can answer that.
I'm happy to answer specifically, obviously, to our Grenfell Housing paper. Obviously, as far as the two outcomes relating to the paper, the one which is an obvious answer, which is to see all those displaced by the Grenfell fire rehoused in permanent accommodation, and we'll continue to support people in order to make that objective. It is regretful that it has taken this long, but in part that is to do with the complexity. As far as the legacy fund is concerned, then I think it's difficult for me to specify what the outcome is until we worked out in terms of with our consultation in terms of what the legacy fund will actually do. And I think when we've done that, then we can clearly define what we're expecting as an outcome on that.
Councillor Ansaran, do you have comments to add to that one? To the question?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Freeman for that question. And you're right, Councillor Freeman. We should always have the outcomes very present in our mind in designing, all of these programs with residents. I mean, I think what I would say is really on the three Grenfell projects that we're talking about tonight. Our outcome is really that the community voice shapes their delivery, and I think that's what we're sort of trying to get at. And I did note down all of Councillor Blakeman's questions, and I do want to have a chance to address all of them. I mean, I'll come back to that. On the outcomes, I mean, I think it's about building on the skills of local people, building resilience. But the main thing about all of these things is that they've got to be community driven, and I think we can always make that better. I think it's not fair to say that there aren't any lessons learned. I mean, I think there are things that we're doing today that we would never have done 4 years ago. Can we do more? Can it be better? Yes, I'm sure it can. And I think one of the roles of this committee is to help to get to that. But as I say, I think, you know, we have made some progress in these areas, and you know, I can give you a number of examples of things that we would never have done 4 years ago. But yeah, you know, to summarize, really, the outcome really is all about it becoming community driven, the community, you know, working with, you know, that community voice.
Thank you. David.
Can I just come back?
Sure. Yeah.
And I think, and I don't in any way want to minimize really the importance of this and what you're trying to do. But my feeling is that unless there are clear objectives, clear outcomes, it has the danger that it's just going to be full of good intentions and actually not achieve what we all want to achieve, which is that people are comfortable to feel that there is real change coming and that they're listened to. Anyway, thank you very much, both lead members, for the answer to my question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was a comment rather than a question, so I will take that on board. In terms of a question, I think David and Simon, I can see both of you have raised your hands and you want to ask a question, but do allow me to get the select committee first, and then I'll come back to you. Simon, for your information, I have you down as to speak on one of the items of the agenda, and that will be the tennis consultation. So you will speak onto that, but you will have also opportunity to ask a question on this, bearing in mind we are in a pre-election period. So both David and Simon, I'll come back to you after the select committee members ask questions. Councillor Greg Hammond.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks to the speakers and to those who've prepared the papers. I've got questions on both papers, so I'll start with housing. And if I may ask how much engagement there's been so far with the consultation on the Housing Legacy Fund, and how big a risk do you think is consultation fatigue, which is a point that Abbas mentioned in his speech. And also, how much involvement do you envisage going forward for residents' associations, who can be articulate and informed voices, but they're also easy to find and self-selecting, and there's a risk there, I think, that they could drown out voices of the seldom heard, people that don't like to be members of residents' associations, a point that Tunde made. So from the housing point of view, could you address those points, and then I'll go on to the communities.
Certainly, and I'll ask Dan if he'd like to answer your questions on the Legacy Fund.
Thanks.
Thanks, councillors. Yes, so far, I think I'd probably break it up into two parts, the engagement work that's gone on. So as you'll have seen from the paper, we're now in the middle of, I think it runs until the first or second week of May, an exercise of consulting with residents across all of the estates and properties which are proposed to be affected. And so that is a live exercise which we don't yet know the outcome of. But that was preceded. So before we did that, and before we drew up those questions and framed it in that way, we had a series of conversations with residents' associations. I mean, in a way, the way we've gone about this is a good illustration of the distinction that you draw about how residents' associations are playing an enormously important part in the way that we engage with residents and the way that we are able to test our thinking and to get input from organised groups of residents. And we had enormously rich conversations in the run-up to the publication of this process. As Councillor Blakeman referred to, we weren't able to accommodate every request from every residents' association, but we heard and we responded and we explained where we weren't following a recommendation from any given association. We did our best to explain why that was, because there were principles we wanted to stay true to in that process. So, it's probably fair to say, just to finish then, the Legacy Fund as currently conceived, I think we probably see this one as being a project which is slightly more about kind of large scale participation and slightly less about that smaller number of residents associations driving it, if you see what I mean. We were really keen that if we're making kind of these lasting investments in legacy, that it be something that be meaningful to as large a plurality of affected residents as possible. And so something which kind of gets directly into every household seemed to us the best way to try and achieve that. But you'll see from the questionnaire that one of the things we're asking is precisely what is the best way for us to achieve that, partly because if it is the case that residents just have had enough of us and don't really want to get involved, then we want to hear that now rather than continue to bark up this tree, if that makes sense. But that's certainly where we've started from with this project.
Okay, thanks very much, Dan. Could I turn to the communities team, please? And Tunde indicated that the community assembly has probably been better in person than online, but is that borne out by the attendance figures? Councillor Blakeman suggested they might have been quite low, but have we got some numbers? And perhaps you could tell us what future topics and themes are planned or expected, please. And turning to the community leadership programme, can you tell the committee how many people have benefited from that so far? And perhaps say a little bit more about capturing how are you going to go about capturing the seldom heard voices, which is really interesting and was your last point. Thanks.
Just before you, Tunde, just before you come to the platform to answer those questions, I would like to ask officers and lead members to give a short, brief answer. Of course, answering the questions, but really brief, rather than making it long, because we have a number of items to go through the agenda. We were planning this was a straightforward agenda meeting, and it wouldn't take that long. But it seems that the interest from the community and other members of the select committee is high. So please keep it brief. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will try to keep it brief. And you may need to, sorry, my pen ran out as I was taking notes, so you may need to remind me of some of the questions. The first question I recall is what's the attendance been like? So we've had 5 assemblies. The health and wellbeing was the first one. The subject matter was health and wellbeing. That was on the 24th of September. There was 40 residents there. So I'm excluding officers. Some residents are officers, but if they attend as residents, we will include them, but we won't include residents who are officers who are working. The second one was on environmental issues on the 23rd of January, and that was 26 attendees. The Grenfell project, the third one was in November. This was the first one delivered by Zoom. And this was the Grenfell Projects Fund and Community Leadership Programme. That was 34, was the attendance. Activities for young people. This was on the 25th of January. This again was delivered remotely through Zoom. There was 56 resident attendees for that one. And the last one was skills and employment, which was on the 22nd of March. There was 11 residents attendees. So it's, as I said, it's fluctuated. Councillor Blakeman rightly pointed out that one of the best and well-organised assemblies was the one for young people, which was run by young people residents, and that gathered a lot of interest. I think that's the way forward. We really want to work with those who are interested, particularly if there's confidence issues and facilitating and creating and developing an assembly. We will be using the community leadership programme, but we really want to work with our residents to give them more of a platform to actually run the show. So that is on our one of our priorities. I think I'll have to come back to you as to, sorry, it's not in my notes, it should have been, but it's I have to come back to you on what will be the next subjects. Usually we do polls during the assembly to work out what the future subjects are. Could you remind me, sorry, Councillor,
yes,
what your last question was as well?
Sure, it was how many people have benefited from the community leadership programme so far, please, and could you say a bit more about how you're going to go about capturing those seldom heard voices?
Sure. So for the community leadership program, 5 courses have been delivered so far, and 579 attendees have attended the course. As part of the work that we're doing and the lessons learned, particularly with working with this community advisory group, we need to, this new focus, the next phase of this will be focused on outcomes. The community leadership program at its heart was supposed to create or enhance the civic skills of our residents so that they can take leadership positions within the community. Year one, when we start things that are new, often, and just being very honest, often you don't know what you don't know until you do it. So there's lots of lessons learned, and I'm really happy to talk to them, speak about them either now or later on, or write to committee members about the lessons learned. The last point about reaching out to seldom heard voices, you would have heard me speak about VCS colleagues as well as faith communities. I just want to be really clear that we don't intend to use VCS as a proxy for speaking to residents, but we do know that some of our VCS partner organisations reach residents that don't usually engage with the council. We've seen this through a lot of the work that we're doing with COVID, where we've spoken to the BME Health Forum, and we've connected with lots of communities, like communities that are disabled. We've got communities who are from ethnic minorities. So we need to get a lot better at this, and I'm really personally excited about some of the connections that we've made during COVID and how these will hopefully pay dividends. So that is, in short, our strategy for at the moment for reaching out to seldom heard voices. We'll also be working closely with councillors as well in order to understand communities that don't normally engage with the council.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tunde, and I think that answers your questions, Councillor Greg Hammond. And my apologies if you hear any background noise. It's my son's bedtime. It's almost past now, so he's not happy about it. And apologies if you hear any background sound or noise from my children. If we move to Councillor Hamish Dorian, you have a question.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you likewise to all the speakers this evening. My question is to Councillor Taylor-Smith. I understand you're starting this new Grenfell Legacy Rehousing and Allocations project to look into improving the resident experience of the court rehousing and letting process. But given that, of course, we are almost 4 years on from the tragedy, could you perhaps tell us about significant improvements to this process that you consider have already been made and fully embedded? Or would you say that effectively this is the start of looking at this area in depth? And then my follow-on question is, how will this project coordinate with all the various other projects relating to housing allocations to try and avoid duplication and possibly over-consultation? Thank you.
Councillor Skin.
Yeah, so thank you for your question, Hamish. So it's fair to say this is the start. I mean, obviously, the last 4 years have been very much our efforts have been concentrated on rehousing following Grenfell, and also having the transfer back of the management of the housing stock from the TMO, and the work that obviously a great amount of work that needs to be done on that. So it's fair to say that has been the concentration of our efforts. This legacy fund is a new aspect. And so, as I say, it's very much in an embryonic thing and very much in the early stages. So, and I've got great hopes for it, albeit that the amount involved is £1 million. It's not a great sum, but I think it can make some difference, and very much make some difference as far as the local area of Notting Dale is concerned. I don't know if Dan wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, only to say that. I do think on the specific kind of questions of allocations and rehousing, I think it probably is fair to say that, the work that we've done, as Councillor Taylor-Smith says, in rehousing the households directly affected by the tragedy has seen, a very kind of concentrated and in lots of cases really positive response from the council and council officers in particular. I guess what this project is trying to do is to capture what we've learned from that experience and to see what we can learn in a way that can then be applied both kind of across the whole borough and kind of over time as we move out of that phase where we're dealing with the rehousing of those households, because there's absolutely no reason that some of the lessons we've learned and the principles that we've applied in that process shouldn't now just be embedded into the way that we do things every day for everyone. And that's really and I think that's what's different about this compared to what's gone before, if that makes sense. That feels like that's the point that we're at and what's informed this decision to do this now. On the question of integration with the other work, it's a really good question. It's a really important one, and actually one I've pressed the team on myself. What we're doing is we're making sure that all of that work is being organised through one team, and that is the team that is working on the allocation scheme itself, and that will make sure that that everything that's, as it were, everything that's done is done once and done in a complementary way and in a way which makes the maximum possible use of the time that we have with residents to avoid precisely the consultation fatigue risk that you describe, as well as just kind of general duplication and overlap risks. So we're very alive to it, but I think you're absolutely right to ask the question. It's something we're going to have to remain alive to through the months that we go through this work.
Thank you.
Can I just chip back in? Actually, just while we're talking about allocations, and this might be a rather unfair thing for me to do, but I noticed that Kojo Sarpong is listening in, and this is his second week, and he's our new director of housing allocation. So I just actually call on, if you are there, Kojo, to maybe just put your camera on and introduce yourself. It seems a timely moment, and I'm sure you've been listening with interest with the comments that were made earlier by Samia with regard to handling of cases. Kojo, are you there?
I am indeed. Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor-Smith. Good evening, everybody. My name is Kojo Sarpong. I am the new Director of Housing Needs. And as Councillor Taylor-Smith said, I am responsible for the allocation scheme, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you. I have taken on board the notes of Samia and have received an email actually in relation to a case which was sent through to us, and we'll be picking up all of the points and hopefully addressing them going forward.
Well,
thank you, Kojo. I'm sorry if I outed you.
No problem, that's fine.
Well, Kojo, if I may say also welcome to RBKC, and I'm sure you will be a wonderful new position, and thank you for applying the job and making sure that you will join RBKC, and I wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Ali.
Hamish, I believe that answered your question. So now,
yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we'll move to Councillor Tom Bennett. Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, no, it's just a quick question on the same topic on paper A4 on the rehousing and allocations project. I know it's largely about learning our own lessons from the past, but I just wonder if it's also going to look more widely, if we're endeavouring to have the best sort of rehousing and allocations process that we possibly can. Are we looking at best practice from around the country and potentially even internationally? I know there's lots of different systems, so that might be of less use, but still there might be some things to be learned there.
The short answer is yes, and we are this year planning to come forward with yet another consultation on the whole basis of housing allocation. It is something that I think was last done 2015. So it's due for a bit of an overhaul, and that's something which we need to obviously come out and talk to our residents about, because suffices to say that we've got some big challenges. We've got a lot of people on our waiting list, and it's something which we need to look at very closely. So yes, it's very high on the agenda.
Thank you, and thank you for the brief answer. Councillor Tom Bennett, I believe you don't have a follow-up, so thank you. Councillor Doris Masling. Dory.
Thank you. I've got to press the right buttons here, that's the thing. And I'm going to get my hand down.
Yeah, I can see you now.
Just let me do that. Sorry, if I don't do it now, I'll forget. Right. Thank you. Now, I think my question has been to I think, to a considerable extent answered, but I'd like to sort of collect the various things under the umbrella of one question in case anything's missing. Is, given what people have said, whether it's Mr. Hawthorne or Blakeman or Mr. Olenka, etc., Councillor Blakeman, sorry, what did I say? What new approaches are we thinking of to try and improve the participation in these? I know there's a risk of consultation fatigue, which has already been mentioned more than once. How do we actually get the attendance up? Are there any new approaches we've looked at to get more people, even if it's fewer or more consultations? I suppose it might go to Mr. Olenka or Councillor Siren, or both.
I think both, yeah. Anyone who will answer that question will be fine, or officers if necessary. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Chair, and if it's okay, I'd like to make a couple of comments on this. So thank you, Dory, for your question. I think this is kind of why I talked in the beginning about finding new ways to engage with people, because not everybody wants to fill out a survey or do things in a traditional way. So I think we have looked at new ways to engage people, co-design. I think what we did with the projects fund, I think, was pretty new, and we did it quite quickly. We'd never done anything like that before. I would like to come back to some of Judith's questions in a minute, but I think what Tunde has talked about, getting local people involved in the Grenfell Assembly. I think we saw with the youth meeting with the Youth Council, and how they, firstly they were brilliant, and they ran the meeting much better than I would have done. But I think the more you involve people in doing these things, I think the better the engagement is. And Judith talked about mistrust, and I think we have to acknowledge that exists, and I think engaging in a way that's really kind of hand in hand is a big part of how we work through that. So that would be my answer, is finding innovative ways of engaging with people, and ways residents want to engage with us, on their terms rather than on our terms. And I think that's certainly what I want to see kind of moving forward. But Tunde, I wondered whether you might want to add a couple of comments as well.
Not terribly. Sorry, Chair. Not many. Without sounding boring, Dory, Councillor Smithling, we have to ask residents how they want us to engage. It's and just on the point of facilitating and being involved in putting yourself out there and trying to make a difference. I really commend all the residents who are here who have done that. It's not always easy, and we've seen that. And one of the things that came back from our discursive engagements in relation to the community leadership programme was one of the themes that have come forward was health and well-being for community leaders. And I think, there has to be support for those who put themselves in community leadership positions, serving their community as well, because it can be a very, very challenging situation, and we saw that even with the young people who ran the Zoom meeting. So those are I think that's apart from that, I have nothing else to add to what Councillor Siren has said.
Thank you.
May I just comment?
Yes.
I attended a couple of TCC, Tenants Consultative Committee meetings in the last few months. And certainly one of them I remember very well, the attendance was really low, and I found it disappointing. But, it's not my issue, I appreciate, but it's just disappointing because there are important subjects to be discussed and worked on, as you've all said.
Thank you. That's a comment rather than a question. So thank you very much, Councillor Ishmael. Just before I move to other participants, I have one question for Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith about the housing issue. You've mentioned the figure of 19 in total. 3 residents have accepted properties but not moved. 3 have yet to accept and 13 are in accommodation. So if temporary accommodation. So if I leave the 3 that have already accepted, the number we have here is 16. These 16 residents who are waiting now to be rehoused, are they Grenfell residents, or are they part of a Grenfell wider community, such as Finger Blocks? Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith.
Yeah, sorry, I was chatting to myself rather than putting myself off unmute. I do apologise. So thank you, Chairman. No, I think I mentioned the 3 are 3 of them are former residents of the tower, and again, we're supporting them in terms of making a choice for their final home. As I mentioned, they're all in private rental accommodation. The other 13 are effectively from the walkways, and the biggest issue we have for their rehousing is bedroom size. You know, because they do wish to remain within the area, but they are of the 13, I think 11 of them are 3 bedrooms plus. So, and that's something we have a really great shortage in terms of available housing stock. So it is making it a little bit difficult to do that and to find those within borough. But yeah, we'll continue to persevere.
Thank you, and I think that really fits in well. So the new properties that we're building, the 600 homes, we will aim for a 3-bedroom property so that we can rehouse our residents. I think we should bear in mind, but you can. I'm not saying this for a question, but I think we should count on this. Overall, what we are getting from here is that the consultation and perhaps more people should be engaging with, and I hope, with, as the lead members said, both the housing and communities, that the consultation will continue, and hopefully more people will be reached out to, and decisions will not be made without reaching out to the bulk of our constituents. Now, David and Simon, thank you, David and Simon, for waiting a long time. I had to get through first to the select committee members. David, you may have a question. David, if you have a question, you have the floor. Right, we will come back to you if you are not at the moment there. Simon, do you have a question? Although you will have a speech later on the item of the agenda that the chair of the Henry Dickinson Court Estate should be talking about, but now instead you are here. So if you have a question, you can ask a question, please. That's Simon. So I believe both David and Simon
Hello, Chair.
Yeah, David, here we go.
I was going to say I have my microphone working now, so I could actually ask a question. Yes.
Good, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair and councillors. I will be brief. It was really, I think, either to Councillor Cyron or to Tunde, but it was about the Grenfell Legacy funds and the Community Assembly. And the Grenfell projects, actually. It was really a cool, I mean, I know I'm from a residents association, but I do think it's important to engage as many people as possible. And I think it's important certainly for the legacy funds to try and make sure that you reach out to residents. So I'm glad to see that you're looking for a good way to do that. One thing I would ask for, though, in all of this is some transparency and some sort of robustness, because I think one of the things that might have been a failing with, say, the Assembly and other things is that the Assembly is quite good, but it's quite big, and you have trouble filling it all the time. I would perhaps maybe try and break it down into smaller sections of engagement where you can perhaps target them more to groups of people, so it becomes more part of what people normally do, because asking people to turn up for a big meeting and talk about lots and lots of different topics, I'm not sure if that's appealing to people in the right sort of way. Whereas if you make it part of what they're doing, or you're reaching out to people who are already using similar services, that might work in a good way. I mean, one of the examples Councillor Simon used was the community connectors that the CNWL are now currently setting up. I'm not sure how much work they've done because they were only appointed about a week or so ago. But I mean, one thing I will say is I spoke to one of the community connectors and asked them about their role, and they said, "Oh, I'm not quite sure what it is. I think so." I'd ask that that maybe other than more layers of bureaucracy, that the council actually tried to just speak directly to people. I understand a lot of this is work you're doing is trying that, but I think it's quite important not to put layers in the way. I mean, I'm in an RA, but I wouldn't say that you should just listen to us, you know. I think it's very important that you would listen to us, say, for advice on how to go about things, but that you try and look to talk to people directly as much as you can.
Thank you, David. And I think that comments the lead member and the relevant lead member and the officers have taken a note of it. And if they want to respond quickly, it would be okay. If not, they have taken the note. And Saran or Tunde, would you like to briefly acknowledge that comment?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, David, and thank you for coming tonight. It's nice to see you. I guess just a couple of points. So I would like Tunde to actually talk a little bit about the Grenfell Project Fund and the engagement and the advisory group that Judith was talking about. So I'll ask him to very briefly, Chair, if it's okay, speak about that. I'm not sure what you mean about transparency, David. I mean, I think it's been a transparent process. We've tried. I mean, Tunde would tell us exactly how many people we've spoken to, but it is many people, and it is taking a little bit of time. But I think that's actually, you know, completely right, because, you know, we want this second year to be a really good project fund, and I think also to talk about the sustainability which Judith raised and how we're going to support some of these groups with finding other funding streams, both in and out of the council. On the community connectors, I think the point that I was trying to make is that there are other people and other partners, statutory partners and non-statutory partners with the voluntary sector, who are going out and engaging with residents. Connectors is a new program, only just learning about it, but I think the idea of people from the community with the community is a really good to stay there. We, the council, can't operate in isolation of those other engagement efforts that are going on, but, you know, by our partners, and we've got to be linked in with each other, otherwise we're going to replicate. And I do genuinely think we can learn from each other and all, you know, do a better job. So I think that's all I was trying to say. I wasn't trying to say that they should do it and we shouldn't. We just have to be more joined up. But Chair, if you'd allow me to just ask Tunde to speak a little bit about the project fund to answer David's first point.
I would really allow, but the time is really getting to us, and I think it would be good to get in touch with David and hopefully welcome from there. You have fairly answered, Saran, the question that really have been asked, or the comment that has been made by David. And if you would not mind, I'm happy to. The next, David, Tunde, if you would please respond to David directly to him. And the relevant residents that have been asking questions, rather than taking from now on time onwards, I will have to move on to ask Simon if he has a question.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'll keep it as brief as I can. Can I, and thank you, Councillor Blakeman and all. Councillor Judith Blakeman raised some issues, but I'd like to touch on one or two more which didn't receive answers or confirmation, and that was a request that to enhance trust between residents and the council, to have a forum of a mixture of staff and residents to translate and interpret results of the survey. The consultation ends on the 9th of May, so that we have greater transparency in the survey itself. Can I have that assurance from either Councillor Taylor-Smith or Councillor Siren?
Any councillor can respond to that, any of the councillors.
I take it that's a no. Well, in the context then of new ways to engage with people, can I say that that's a very disappointing result, not to have a comment?
Well, sorry, I was just trying to comment.
Simon, if I can stop you, sometimes it takes a bit while to get the microphone mute and unmute, so let's wait for others to respond.
My apologies, I'm just a fast worker.
No, absolutely fine. No, we're here to do that, to facilitate the residents and the leaders to communicate. So, Councillor Taylor-Smith.
Yeah, I'd be very happy to formulate a way of looking at evaluating the responses that we get on the legacy fund. On that, as it's very important to get everybody's view and also how people are interpreting it. So that's something which I think we can take away.
Okay, fantastic.
Question?
Yes, sorry, a follow-up to that.
Yes.
In terms of awards for which I know haven't obviously been decided yet, and that further forum comes in step on paper A4 comes in step with between items 5.6. In case you're wondering where that step that I've just suggested comes in. The other issue is in relation to groups, estates that want to put forward projects need to obviously have a suitable, accessible working space to operate from. And although a couple of councillors present at the meeting, in fact 4 councillors, are aware of this, there is a large estate in the north of the borough, in Nottingdale, which has been waiting 2.5 years since believing it was given the right to manage its own clubroom. In fact, it's been waiting 3 months since it forwarded comments on a draft license agreement, and there seems to be an issue with some underlying problem, but we haven't been told what it is. Again, in terms of ensuring and enhancing trust between residents and council, perhaps someone would like to comment on why that is.
If I can come back to that point just before any other councillors are responding to this. As you're well aware of, Simon, we cannot talk about individual cases or individual housing estates for this scrutiny meeting. However, you have raised a very valuable point. If the decision has been made and has been not taking on and for all this time, I would request the lead member responsible or the relevant officer to answer briefly on this. If no answers cannot be obtained this evening, should be follow up to our next few days, if not the latest by our next meeting on 24th of May 2021. So any response to Simon's question?
Doug, are you on the call?
Yes, I am, Kim.
Would you like to respond to Simon's question?
Well, without giving details of the matter away would be quite difficult, given what we're in. But there is a building on the estate where we have had quite a lot of dialogue between the party that is currently in occupation of that building and the RA. I'm happy to give a full report of where we're at in the right environment. I'm not sure that this would be the correct environment tonight, but that has been it hasn't been straightforward in terms of resolving this matter, and I appreciate that Simon and the Residents Association do have a very distinct and very strong view about what should happen. What I will make sure, and I am aware that one of my officers was in discussion with the RA just last week in terms of this very point. What I am happy to do is bring something back to this scrutiny committee if that is what the wishes of the committee are.
Thank you. And just to answer that, we cannot, and we never spoke or talk about or have a discussion on particular issues or individual caseworks. However, just for the committee, if necessary, you can share with us just for the committee via email or via officers, and hopefully this matter will be resolved before or at least reach agreement before our next meeting. That's on May the 24th. And I think that would be fine to leave it there because we cannot talk about individual cases. Simon, I hope that answers your question. Do you have a quickly follow-up one?
The response that Doug Goldring's given is, and within the confines of the committee, is that, and the commitment thereof is if I may say so, a rather vague one. I'd like. I understand the constraints of the committee in not dealing with specific issues, which seems to be quite odd if we're talking about a scrutiny committee. But that's perhaps for another day. I would like to have a firmer commitment from Doug Goldring that of a response within a certain timescale, which I think is reasonable.
Sorry, can I make clarity? A response to the select committee?
Well, a response to us and copied to the select committee.
Within a timescale. Yes,
timescale, indeed.
Yeah.
I think that's quite reasonable to expect.
Yes, absolutely. Usually we would. I'm happy to respond to the select committee within 2 weeks. Absolutely. I was under the impression you were clear of where the council's current position was, but if that's not the case, Simon, I will make sure that you are as soon as possible.
Is that also within the 2 week timescale?
Oh, absolutely.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we're certainly not very things are made more ambiguous by telephone calls than pinned down in emails.
Perhaps, and I'm happy to rectify that.
Thank you. Thank you both, Simon and Doug Goldring. And I'm glad that we have reached to the point where we can say within 2 weeks there will be an answer to this. This was the last part of the Grenfell themed of the meeting. We have other agendas to go through, so please bear with us. And if I just summarize to the points, the important points we have been discussing here, it's to if I may welcome again our new Director of Housing Needs. He will respond to Kojo will respond to Sami's comments or any other comments that relating to the housing needs, and specifically the 5 days notes to move. And also Sami mentioned about the individual caseworks, which he will respond to that, and the trust of RBKC. That was another important bit, the trust between the council and its residents to be worked on, and also reach further more residents for any consultations, and no secret meetings to be held for a specific group of residents, as Abbas mentioned, and Councillor Judith Blakeman has mentioned the need to consult with councillors, elected councillors for the ward, and the council, not just to deal with other residents or even other community members ignoring the elected councillors. And I think that's a valid point, and other projects including the swim unity and others to be funded, and the support for the long term for this community to get back on its feet. That concludes our item agenda for both 4 and 5. It's taken a little longer than expected, but here we go. We had to go through this because it's important agenda for our community. Now I would like to welcome the item number 6, or A6. That's a report for Housing Safety and Healthy Homes Working Group. And please do join me to thank our working group chairman, Councillor Greg Hammond, and his committee, his team, for really working hard on this, and the support that they have been has been given by the officers. Councillor Greg Hammond, please summarize 5 to 7 minutes or so for the findings of the report, and then we will take it from there.
Thanks very much, Chair, and I'm pleased to present this report on behalf of the working group. Of course, I'm not going to go through all the detail in the report, but I will start by thanking the members of the working group, Councillor Bakhtiar and Councillor Bennett from the Select Committee, and Councillor Blakeman, who joined us just a few weeks in and was in it with us for the majority of the time. And I'd like to thank the officers who helped us. I'll name Ryan McGowan, who supported our research phase and did the first draft of the report before he left the council on the 28th of February. And thanks to Hannah Davenport, who picked up the drafting at that point and through to the final version. And thanks also to the housing and environmental health teams who supported us throughout our work with information and participation. We started our work by reading quite a lot of literature around the subject before launching our resident survey. This survey was deliberately framed very widely with a view to allowing unknown issues to be raised, And indeed, our 3 recommendations about the emphasis on building security and CCTV are a result of that survey. The survey results also helped us to frame our questions to the housing providers when we had our conference on the 12th of February. We were very pleased with that conference because we had 6 out of the 11 registered providers in the borough attended, plus the council. And we did get apologies from one housing association, technical problems on the day from another, and subsequent engagement from a third, leaving only 2 that didn't engage with us at all. So it was a good start in terms of engagement with housing associations. I thought it was a very productive conference, and several of our recommendations in the report are framed around furthering the relationship with the housing associations. We particularly welcome the council's new registered providers forum. Obviously, a report like ours was actively looking for problems, and not surprisingly, we found some which are highlighted in the report, both in terms of physical risks and risk to health, the main one of those being damp and mould. If we'd had more time, we would have explored in some detail how this council discharges its duty under the Housing Act 2004 to conduct reactive assessments using the Housing Health and Safety rating system, the HHSRS, but we ran out of research time, and therefore a paper on this subject is one of our recommendations for follow-up during the next council year, so we can discuss it in this committee when we know a bit more about it. We also thought it would be interesting to hear the council's thoughts on adopting a healthy homes standard for the remaining stages of the New Homes programme. But as explored in some detail in the paper, there's no definitive standard to adopt. So we would be interested in hearing what the council thinks about that in the next year. Last point, major point, although we were looking for trouble, it is impossible to come to a definitive conclusion from the evidence we've seen about how good or how bad our RBKC's social housing is. Our survey size was far too small to provide more than anecdotal evidence, although it was useful evidence and it was useful for giving us questions to ask. And the MHCLG statistics, which we've quoted in the paper, have all sorts of problems with them that mean you can't draw reliable conclusions from them. And although we've quoted the statistics, we have put balancing points in the narrative in the text. So, for example, the data seem to show a deteriorating picture in RBKC since the council took management of social housing back in-house from the TMO 3 years ago, whereas the reality is that this is probably a result of more honest reporting since the council took over from the TMO, and the significant investment the council is making will be starting to bring results. So we do as a committee as a working group, want to take the opportunity to commend many of the things the council's been doing since it took over from the TMO. We recognise there's a mountain to climb, but the investment that's already been put in and the future plans are genuinely impressive in terms of both maintenance and upgrades. And we would expect these to bear fruit in terms of significantly improving safety and health standards for residents over the coming years. So I would open this up to question and discussion, but my formal proposal to the Select Committee is that we adopt this report and its recommendations in full as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greg Hammond. And I think, if I may also include that the report, this is the beginning of Healthy Homes, has been done before, and I'm glad that you and your fellow councillors, member of the Select Committee and member of the working group, have managed to put together with a short time. Indeed, this is the shortest time in terms of a working group and in terms of the Select Committee, because you remember we had to be part of September to design the work program. So this was a short municipality. So thank you. I have 1 or 2 amendments or 1 or 2 recommendations to add, and we can come back to this in our last meeting in May. But the point that I would like to add is to what has been mentioned before, is when the council, when the new property or any property is being vacated and someone else is moving to that property. So if it's a council-owned property, the council should have at least standard for healthy homes. For example, no damp-related issues, no some significant for health and safety of the new tenant, and I think that would be important. We have been dealing with some caseworks that people have been moved to properties that are not fit for human habitation. So the council-owned properties should be checked and have the clearance. It could be either a certificate or somebody signs off to have healthy homes standard, which is a home that's a fit for human habitation. That's a council-owned property. And secondly, we can ask our providers, registered providers, to do the same recommendation. We can't force them, but we can do advise them if they can also have someone to sign it off to say this home meets the standard healthy homes or meets the standard for human habitation. Those are the two recommendations I would like to add to the recommendations, and if it's feasible, we can take it from there. And if the committee of the selection committee would like to agree on this, I'll be happy to say take these recommendations forward and ask the whole committee to accept this report. And happy to hear from any other suggestions from the Councillor Doris Schmasling.
Chair, if I could come back to you because, sorry, Chair, if I could come back to you because you've I think it's quite difficult to add a recommendation on the fly because these things are quite, it takes quite a long time to draft them into a form where they're achievable. I mean, I quite like what you're saying, but I think to adopt recommendations like that tonight without some considerable thought and some interchange with the council executive to see what's achievable, I think would be a bit risky, and I'd like to hear what the executive have to say about what they heard before thinking about going forward. And it might be that we have an initial discussion on those 2 points, and maybe we could add them as a recommendation at our next meeting, just as a standalone item.
Thank you. I think that's a valid point. And one thing, though, I would say is to for the executives, this is for the select committee meeting, and we as the committee members have to decide what to go from here. And then the executive team, the lead member for housing and his team will have 2 months to take the recommendations on board. It's not for a lead member to say, yes, I can add this point and I'm happy to do this point. I think we are in the position for us as a select committee to decide the way forward. And then when we do, then the leadership will have 2 months to come back to us whether they can take suggestions on board or will they need more time. I think there is no place or space for the leadership or the executive group to comment on this item. It is meant for the select committee members, if that makes if I made that clear. But certainly can get involved.
Constitutionally, of course, you're correct, and I'm not in the business of giving the leadership team an easy ride. On the other hand, if we recommend something that's not achievable, then we look stupid. So I think we do need to hear what the housing officers would have to say about those points and to see what's achievable. And perhaps that's something that could be done between. I mean, if you'd like to draft the points, that would be something that the maybe Doug could comment on, because I think it's the first one is largely in his area. He could perhaps comment on whether it's achievable or not and talk to us at the next select committee meeting.
Thank you. Absolutely, that's a valid point, Doug. I will come back to you in a second, but yes, that's absolutely fine. We can do that, and we have to be within the rules of managing what we can do as a selection committee. There's a distinction between the two, the leadership, of course, and the selection committee scrutiny team members. So I'll take that on board, and if possible, we can actually move it to the final decision once we have a drafted to the May meeting to decide. I'm very much flexible to this, but I would like to thank you again and other committee members for Councillor Mo Bakhtia and Councillor Tom Bennett, and of course the Councillor Judith Blakeman for doing what you have done and for the support you have given. So just to finish with this point, Doug Goldring, you were saying something. Please take the floor. I will come back to you, Councillor Doris Matley.
I was just saying, Chair, that you do have proposed to bring empty properties or voids to the next select committee, and we could easily include our assessment of that point in that for the select committee to scrutinise us.
Thank you. That's absolutely right, and we will come back to that for the agenda item for the next meeting. the last meeting for this municipality. Councillor Dorish Martling, any comments that you have to about the working group? And Councillor Greg Hammond will respond to you.
Thank you. It's really perhaps a fairly small point, and is also related to the part of the discussion we had on the previous points. Is there were 41 responses, as Councillor Hammond mentioned, and it's in the report. I was just curious to know to how many households approximately the questionnaire or the survey was distributed.
I don't think it was actually physically distributed at all. It was an online survey, and attention was drawn to it by social media. I think that's true of the council, but I think some of the residents' associations did write to it. Actually, I'm going to have to turn to the. I don't think we've got an officer here with Ryan having left the council who would be able to give a precise answer to that question. So I know it went out in writing to a couple of the residents' associations because one of them sent it after it had technically closed, and that caused a bit of upset, as you can imagine. But we did take the we weren't managed to get all the answers in and include them. So that's not really a proper answer, Dory, I'm afraid.
No, but my question was also not quite so well phrased in the sense that, how many emails were sent out, or how many, if the RAs got it, do we know what their membership is and whether they actually, well, I would hope they distributed the message to their members to the extent they could. The people are on email, but we'd have no idea how many people were represented, let's say, received the email.
Yes, it certainly went to the RAs by email, and but of course we don't know which of them distributed it further because that's a matter for them. Sure. But could I bring in Anna, who's from the governance team, who may be able to help with that, as she was working possibly on that. Anna.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hammond. I can't give you an exact answer now, but we can probably go back because, as you mentioned, Ryan has left, but we can probably go back and find out a bit more information about how the distribution was done and perhaps reply to you by email, if that would be helpful.
Yes, thank you very much. That would be helpful, because then it gives us an idea what happens when you do, alert, say, RAs to something like this. Then we can see how many they represent. Is it a couple of hundred altogether, or is it a couple of thousand? That kind of thing. So maybe get some rough idea. That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks very much for jumping in there, Anna. That was helpful. And could I just go back to Doug's very helpful comment? And I think if we're talking about voids next time, that's at least the first part of the recommendation that you mentioned, Chair. I think that would be a very legitimate thing for the Select Committee to add as a recommendation from that discussion that we have in the next meeting.
Yeah.
And therefore, I would beg to move that we adopt this this report.
I certainly will say I will be happy to. I think before we say adopt, Councillor Taylor-Smith may have some suggestions.
Yes, I know. I think in terms of recommendations plus further recommendations, I think it would only be right that as lead member, I can respond to your report before you make your recommendations. So first of all, I just wanted to say a big thank you. I want a big thank you to Councillor Hammond and everybody who took part at his working group with officers as well in order to come up with this, to produce this report. I mean, that's, very well appreciated. I think I just really wanted to sort of comment in general terms just on it, because I think first point I really wanted to make is that this report really does chart the journey that we as RBKC are on this housing management, from a housing management perspective, on our homes. And our stock condition survey, really has highlighted many, many more problems than were passed on to us by the TMO when they handed back their housing management 3 years ago. So I think getting to an accurate position and being very transparent with our residents and taking the necessary steps to overcome all the problems that we have is absolutely essential as far as the council is concerned. I say with a bit of a smile on the recommendations, taking into account the views of 41 people, 33 of which reported an issue, and only 5 of which were council tenants. Particularly in the light of the conversation we've been having about the difficulty of getting people to engage. But however, I've always been a great believer it's quality rather than quantity, and it's important that we, no matter how small the number might be, that we take on board and don't disregard anybody's opinion, even if the sample is sourced. And I think there's some very good points made in here. I think some of the issues that you have identified, and particularly if we look at the recommendation 2 on entrance security, is already underway. It's part of our CCTV review. However, many of the blocks, use the allocated estate improvement fund to fix some of these issues. And anecdotal evidence that we've received from cases we've dealt with suggests that this isn't actually a big issue, but as the report is making out, it's something that's applicable and we should obviously very much take consideration on. I think also I'd just like to talk about our relationship with housing associations, and I've been making a point of going around and seeing all of our housing associations and meeting with them, because quite frankly, I don't believe that their performance and contribution, to the challenges that the council faces are good, be it in terms of the allocation numbers that we've got, but I stress that we do have to take a very collegiate approach with these housing associations if we're going to get some good outcomes. And I've always seen this as very much a carrot and stick exercise with because they are the main provider of council homes to the boroughs. And so when we talk to them about challenging them about the service that they are providing to residents, we've got to do so in a bit of a balanced way, and maybe not too publicly at a time when our own service is still in early days of transition. And we're not yet at an upper quartile authority in terms of our housing management. So I just caveat that in much that I wouldn't want this to backfire. And the old cliche of throwing houses at stones when you're in a glass house, etc. I think the final thing I just really wanted to say is there's a reference in terms of our private sector housing team, which was very much impacted when we decoupled from Hammersmith and Fulham, with most of the officers remaining in Hammersmith and Fulham and not with us. And we've now recruited a team. And given that we've got over 8,000 properties in PRS, which we predicted, might well have a Category 1 hazard, that's going to obviously be things that we're going to have to do. And the scale of that, obviously, when we're looking at private sector housing, is massive. And obviously in December, just to remind you, in November last year, the council passed a decision to establish a private sector licensing scheme, which I think will very much hope on this. I mean, you've given a number of individual recommendations, which again, I'm happy to go through if you wish us to respond to each of your recommendations that you have, Mr. Chairman, if that's relevant, or I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much indeed. I hate to interrupt you, but this is you've raised a very good point, and I think when the report comes to your desk, you will have 2 months or so to respond to the select committee, and hopefully I think that will be a very valid point, and I thank you for your.
I'll be happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. And Councillor Hammond, please take it away.
Yeah. So just. Coming back to Councillor Taylor-Smith on those, I mean, I think there's no need to go through the detail tonight, because the executive has a chance to come back to us in 2 months, or indeed in some of the recommendations we've given a significantly longer period to come back and bring those to the select committee in the next council year, because they require a bit more thought and time. Yes, I agree on the survey numbers. I mean, of course, it's very small numbers. They were helpful to us in identifying 1 or 2 trends, and in giving us some questions to ask the housing providers, and also put some colour on the literature that we read, and we did read a significant amount of reports on the subject from parliamentary committees and the MHCLG. The entrance security, welcome what you say on entrance security, and clearly you're on it already. So I mean, it'd be great to see your response to that in writing when you respond to this report in the next council year. Completely agree with you on the housing association relationship, and the RP, the Registered Provider Forum, I think is an excellent initiative. and I think in the next year we'd want to do one of those in public, as we've said, so we can have a chance as councillors and members of the public to ask questions, but recognising that the majority of those meetings will happen between officers and the providers over the year as part of that collegiate approach. But thank you to the lead member for his response. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. And I do apologise if everyone saw me sipping my cup of coffee. I'm breaking my fast. It's the holy month of Ramadan. It's been a long day, so do excuse me if you see me a couple of times sipping. I haven't had my coffee since I would say yesterday. So I think that's a good point. You've raised Councillor Greg Hammond to move this report, and I support with the amendments that I've just mentioned. And do you want to ask other, or should I ask other councillors, other select committee members if they wish to comment? If not, then we will move forward and accept this and hopefully get it back with amendments next month.
Well, I think we're accepting the report as written, and then we're going to add. We're going to make a recommendation on the completely separately when we have a discussion on void properties next month, because the point that you made really fits nicely into that. So we can make a recommendation after that item in the agenda next month.
Yeah, I'm happy with that, and I think we should move on. And if there's no objections, then we accept the report.
Agreed.
Thank you. I would like to hear most of the select committee members to move forward, please. Thank you, Councillor Mo-Bakhtia.
Agreed. Agreed, Chairman.
Agreed, Doreen.
Thank you. Thank you. That's the majority. So the report is accepted as written, and we will make the recommendations, the rest of it, for the next meeting. If I move this item, make it fairly short, because I really want to move to item number 8. So I'll come back to number 7. Can we move to item number 8, please?
Hello, councillors. Bernadette Fry, Assistant Director of Neighbourhoods, and I'm going to present this report this evening. This report was requested really by way as an update to the committee as a result of resident concerns about the proposed changes to the tenancy agreement. So at the moment, we are still out of consultation, but it's probably worth spending a little bit of time describing the background to this so that everybody is fully aware of how it arose. Essentially, the tenancy agreements haven't been reviewed since 2014, and it is normal in housing organisations from time to time to review the tenancy conditions, because the law changes. There are different issues that need to be taken account of within the tenancy agreement, and it's the main vehicle that governs the landlord-tenant relationship. So the review had been planned for some time, but the original discussions were initiated from various conversations that took place in 2019 at several tenants consultative committees regarding laminate flooring. And a number of residents had raised the issue that the provisions within the tenancy agreement for laminate flooring and for it to be fitted and supplied properly differed from those in leases, which meant that you could have a leaseholder and a tenant in the same block, but subject to different obligations. So we agreed to review this, and in order to be able to strengthen the clause on flooring, it required a change to the tenancy conditions. So it seemed sensible that if we were making one change, we should review the whole agreement just to make sure that it was still fit for purpose. As I say, it hadn't been reviewed for 7 years. So I think before I say anything more, it really should be stressed that the proposed changes are not in any way meant to reduce the security of tenure for residents. In fact, most of the changes proposed are fairly minor and relate to wording, and that's for clarity. But there are some new additions which include things like data protection, subletting, lodgers, and that sort of thing. So it's kind of a you know, it's a catch-all. It's trying to scoop up all these things that needed tidying up in one go. So in order to take it forward, there was a task and finish group set up, largely from members of the TCC, and over a period of about 8 to 9 months, they spent time reviewing each clause in the tenancy conditions and proposing changes. It is fair to say that there wasn't complete agreement amongst the members of the task and finish group, but the conversations and discussions unpacked a number of issues. And because this is something that impacts on all residents and all prospective residents, it was felt that actually the consultation needed to go wider, hence the documents being sent out to residents, a number of Zoom meetings being arranged, and a survey. I think in a way, the reaction we've had is proof that consultation does work, but probably for the wrong reasons, because what happened was residents became very anxious that we were in some way attempting to reduce their security of tenure and do it in a sort of a covert way. That absolutely isn't the case. And this is very much an issue, I think, of communication, but also probably one of trust. So the consultation closes on the 2nd of May. We have another Zoom meeting tomorrow. Once we've had all the results back from the consultation, that will then be analysed and prepared in a paper for decision making. I probably should also add that we've agreed with those concerned residents that we would run some further workshops with an independent facilitator, probably from TPAS or some similar organisation, in order to bring some objectivity to it. So it's not a them and us, it's a kind of a constructive approach to unpacking and understanding the changes that we're proposing. There is no great timescale on this. We're in no rush to see it through. It's much more important that residents are comfortable with proposed changes and also have the opportunity to comment and put forward their own changes as well. And I think I'll stop there if there are any questions.
Thank you, Bernadette. And I will just summarize the points that you have just mentioned. This is it happened in 2014 last time. It's kind of overdue, and it's related to the laminate flooring and one tenants and also some leaseholders. It's a minor. It's for clarity, data protection, and subletting and so on. But you've mentioned an important point. You've said you had a subgroup within the TCC, and that subgroup is called Task and Finish Group. And also you've said there is no rush for timing for this. You can allow more residents more time. So on that note, I would like to call Vasilika to speak up to 5 minutes on this item. Vasilika, if you're here, Vasilika, please do take the floor and speak on this item agenda for up to 5 minutes. I'll give you more seconds to see if Vasilika is here. Right. I think she may not be here. What about Simon? Simon, you were also down for this item to speak to. Please take the floor if you can hear me, Simon.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair, and thank you, Bernadette. I thought that at a previous TCC meeting that it was agreed that there would be a meeting with a CAB or a law centre to go through the proposed clauses, not only or instead of TPAS. It is true what Bernadette says about a number of people being concerned about their security of tenure being lost. And I think, again, it was something that was pointed out at previous forums, because it states in the covering letter that although you won't be required to sign it, nevertheless, it will be enforceable. So there's a point at which people don't necessarily understand. If you don't sign something, it nevertheless will be enacted. So I think that requires, as I thought was agreed at a previous meeting, further clarification. But perhaps, Bernadette, if you could come back on the CAB issue, that would be great.
Yep, certainly. Should I do that now?
Yes, please. If you can answer it quickly, that's fine. But I will also go back to the select committee members. But since Simon asked you that director question, please answer.
Okay. So yes, Simon, it has been sent to the CAB for comment, and we're also contemplating sending it also to Shelter for them to have a look as well. They have quite a good legal team, and as of yet, I mean, it was sent over to the CAB about a month ago. We haven't had any comments yet, so that's one for us to chase up. So yes, it's still ongoing. And when it comes to the letter that was sent out, I think we could all agree that that was poorly communicated. It gave a kind of formal and legalistic tone, which really did worry residents, and I think we've learned from that.
So sorry, can I add something which I should have asked before? Sorry, all, and that is, whilst Bernadette, you say there's no time scale, I think it would be right to put some kind of time scale on it, albeit longer than envisaged. Do the committee agree that, or am I being unduly forward in suggesting that?
The committee's comments will come shortly, but in the meantime, there's no time scale, no rush. Then the deadline for the consultation is the 2nd of May. That is actually contradicted. So there is a deadline, there is a timeline, and it's in a couple of days actually, rather than a couple of weeks. So
well, that's why I'm asking really, because if there's no timescale, surely that date of the 2nd of May is irrelevant.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. Could I just clarify? So there's no timescale for the decision making. The idea is that we set out a consultation period, and clearly we want to get as many comments back as possible. But the actual decision, there isn't a timescale on that, and that will depend on the leadership team and members as to what the next steps should be.
Okay. Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hello?
I think you're back now. Yes, we were looking for you to speak. Yes, you have up to 5 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, please. You can speak now.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me. Sorry, I was not able to hear everything Bernadette said, but just to make some comments on the Housing and Community Select Committee with respect to the review of tenancy conditions. So the proposal, the first thing I would like to say is that the proposal was made during COVID-19 lockdown, during an election period, and with no resident participation. There was talk about the Housing Act 1985, Section 103, and I like to refer to it because there is a procedure to follow. And the first steps of this procedure include things like, before serving a notice of variation on the tenant, the landlord shall serve him with a preliminary notice by informing the tenant of the landlord's intention to serve a notice of variation. Then what you are doing now, Bernadette, with your team is what follows, okay? So a bit of, you know, when you implement or when you refer to a Housing Act, you cannot pick and choose. You have to follow all the steps from start to finish.
Basilica, can I just say, can you finish all your points, and then we will come back to response rather than directly questioning Bernadette. So please finish your points, and then we will come back to it as a question.
Nevertheless, thank you, Chair. So nevertheless, we have arrived at the present stage, and subsequently residents have been offered a series of consultation to discuss the variation of conditions. Having attended the second consultation, we learned that the Housing neighborhood team have instructed local and national agencies to look at the agreements. In the meantime, being unaware of the neighborhood team, what they were trying to do, some residents themselves tried to approach the same agencies for advice. Unfortunately, the response was negative. However, we have no doubt that the neighborhood team, sorry, before I say that, probably because of conflict of interest. However, we have no doubt that the neighborhood team shall cover the parts that concern residents. But what it means is that residents themselves cannot get proper advice nor representation, and therefore they are missing out on the consultation as they cannot have direct input. In other words, we residents lose on our direct say. A little bit more on resident participation. In A4 Appendix 2, it's mentioned meeting with a small group of residents, and Section 5 on resident consultation, paragraph 5.4, it goes on to say that there was representation at the Nottingdale local housing meeting and the TCC 11th of March and 23rd of March, respectively. So my comments are these. Neighborhood management consultation was a meeting with a steering group. This is something we found something later on. A steering group of 15 residents. And we want to know, please make a note of this, we need to know who are these residents and who do they represent. I'm referring to the residents in the steering group. Who has mandated them to represent 8,000 secure tenants in the RBKC. And I go on to highlight about the importance of resident participation. In Housing Act 1985, councils are required to inform and consult secure tenants individually rather than collectively on specific matters relating to the management of their homes. Section 104 of the Act requires landlords to give all tenants a written explanation of their conditions of tenancy, statutory rights, and the arrangements for consultation. Section 105 of the same Act places a duty on the councils to consult tenants on any changes in housing management. So further, if I can take this further, on resident involvement, since 2002, 2003, and 2005, the outcome of a review on involvement policy, we know that the policy built on existing resident participation guidance, committees in control and making consumers count, with resident involvement to be at the heart of housing issues, strategy, decision-making, and ethos. So all of these on housing, resident participation. Karim, how do we do for time?
Yes,
Chair.
You should summarize. To your points now. Your actually time is up.
Okay.
So I'll allow you to summarize.
Okay, I'm not going to refer to any other matters at the moment. I would like to request, again, openly, what I have requested in a letter to Councillor Taylor-Smith. We need details leading to the decision for the proposed changes to the tenancy agreements, which includes secure tenancies, and also the ultimate purpose. Further, we require the council to provide independent consultants to advise the residents on this matter. And we request that you put on hold the decision until the residents have been properly consulted according to the law. So the 2nd of May, on the consultation for the variation of the conditions is too short time for everybody to be well informed and understand what is happening. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vasilika, for your time, and thank you for the long wait during this time. So appreciate for your time. Just to summarize, the two speakers have mentioned the importance of time, and this is during a lockdown. It's been happening during a re-election, which I have been reminding everyone. And I think the timing is important for the consultation to be perhaps extended, and the decision to be made sometime in the early of autumn, so September, October onwards. And I think the consensus here, the selector committee will come, by my view as the chair, will be the consultation time to be extended to perhaps maybe another 4 weeks minimum, and then to know, or maybe a month or two, because we're coming out of a lockdown. We are in a pre-election time, and I think that will give more time, and if necessary, legal requirements, so that the residents know exactly what they're going into. And finally, how can someone be held accountable if they don't sign a contract, or the variation of contract is not something, a new contract to be signed? So those are the important points. I will allow you, Bennett, to answer some of the questions, but I would like to go to Councillor Greg Hammond to ask a question.
Thanks, Chair. And I think my question might lead into an answer to some of the wider points that Vasiliki brought up just now. So for Bernadette is how many responses are needed for this exercise to be judged representative and therefore a successful consultation? So what is the critical mass in terms of a response, and how are we doing so far? I appreciate that the consultation closure date is something we've just been discussing, but what's the return rate like so far?
Hello. The last count, we had around 100 responses online, and it's difficult to say what the critical mass would be, because some consultations we get very little feedback at all. A recent one with the rent income consultation, we had a handful, so we've extended the timeline. With the environmental improvements, the environmental sorry, it wasn't that. It was the return of the cleaning contract back in-house. We had over 700 responses. So it's really difficult to gauge. So, I mean, I think it's absolutely right and fine to extend it. If we hadn't got COVID restrictions in place, we would have done lots of roadshows and open meetings and things like that. So yes, I mean, I think Vasily was right in the sense that we've got to stick to the law, and that's what we're doing. And this is very much a consultation piece. No decisions have been made, and I don't think any of us would want to impose something that was clearly unpopular onto residents. That isn't what we're about, and this is all about changing the culture. Somebody mentioned earlier. So you know, we'll rethink it. We'll respond absolutely to residents' concerns, and I can't stress enough, no decisions have been made, and there's no rush to run this through, to put this through.
So,
okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Just to get to add a bit more to the question that to follow up question that Councillor Greg Hammond asked you. You've answered how many people have responded, and just to add the numbers to connect the dots. Vasilika talked about 8,000 or 8,500 tenants, and you've mentioned the response about 100. Is that correct?
So far, when I last checked, yeah.
Definitely. So
and that was through the website.
Thank you. And we can imagine the difference between 8,500 and 100.
Yes.
So I think it's definitely a matter of time, not just weeks, but a few months, to reach out to more residents, and residents feel not to feel like they've been left out of being pushed to a decision that they think. I'm sure many people will get in touch in time, but we will leave it to you to extend the time and hopefully reach out to more people. Shall we say, as we speak, perhaps on behalf of the committee, and the committee can get involved and ask questions if required, that the deadline as we speak on the 2nd of May is no longer relevant? Shall we say that? Benedict, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, sorry, I thought you were asking the committee.
No,
yes, of course, absolutely.
We have been promised by Ms. Cotino that the 2nd of May doesn't apply. We haven't had it in writing yet.
I'm just making the commitment, Facilica, if you will hold on for me, please. I'm just making on this program that since we have 100 response out of 8,500, shall we say it's relatively to say that fair to say that the deadline for the 2nd of May is no longer relevant. Can we say that on this select committee meeting?
Absolutely.
Thank you. That answers my question, and I think that deadline will be extended. I don't know how many months, but it's no longer relevant, and hopefully we will get more people to contribute and respond. And on behalf of the committee, I would like the residents who are watching here, or maybe who will be watching this program, this select committee meeting, to hopefully contribute and take part the necessary consultations for future programs and for this one variations of the tenants. So thank you, Bernadette. I think there's no more questions coming from selection committee, so we should move on from this item. Facilica, that answered the question. Is your hand still up? Do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I just wanted to make a suggestion, and this is the reasons that thank you, Chair. The reasons that Bernadette gave us, and they gave us one more reason at the consultation. You spoke about laminated flooring, etc., and they also mentioned at the consultation something to do with the about antisocial behavior. Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, what I don't understand is how my secure tenancy or the secure tenancy agreement of 8,000 odd residents prohibit you or prevent you from implementing, antisocial behavior, repossession or prosecution. We have the Antisocial Behavior Crime and Policing Act 2004, Part 5, Secure Tenancy and Possession Grounds which were introduced under Part 5. So what else do you need? Why do you need to take, to break our agreements in order to be able to enforce things which are in place, acts which are in place? In addition, we have the tenant's handbook. Why don't we review the handbook and make changes to the handbook? Because the tenancy agreement for me, is like my passport. When you start messing about with it, it compromises my rights as a secure tenant. And this is the way all the residents feel about it. So maybe we can find a way for the council to be able to enforce, the rules, the laws which are there without, having to compromise our tenancy agreements.
Thank you.
This is all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think your point has been taken on board, and I can see Bernadette shaking her head and
nodding.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. And I think the deadline will be, has been effectively extended, and we will know how many months from now onwards there will be the deadline. But thank you, Facilica, for your time, and Simon and everyone who spoke on this. We will move on from this point, and appreciate for your time. If we move to the we have another work program. Sorry, we have a work program. I completely left item 7, as I said before, and item number 9 is also selected committee work program. That can wait for our last meeting, and since we are dealing with that item, so we will leave that item, and hopefully scrutiny manager, and it's been really great officer, and I thank her for her time, and for that's Jackie Head and her officers, her team. Jackie, thank you for all the time you've been supporting my team and others, my selection committee and others. We will leave this item to the next agenda and hopefully pick it up from when we have the final, and that will be fitting If I may move on to any other urgent business for this for the last item for this. Quickly, I will mention there has been a development in Barbie Primary School, and this is related to the housing and building. Kingspan material has been used at the council, at the building by a contractor who has subcontracted a Kingspan material. It's fair to say a demonstration has happened there, and the lead member was there. Myself, I was there just to declare that I am the ward councillor for that ward, Delgado ward, and also other councillors, including Councillor Embedson Code and the leader of the opposition, Councillor Pat Mason, was also there. So if I may ask, and the lead member responds, Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith, on the morning said no Kingspan material will be used as effective as this day, at this moment will be removed, and that was his words, and the material that has been used will be removed again. So I thank him for that, and he also wrote a short initial response. I'm sure there will be a more response to come, but to have opportunity to give to ask question about this, I would like to welcome the leader of the opposition, Councillor Pat Mason, to ask direct questions about this, since he was there at the demonstration at the Barbie Primary School. Councillor Pat Mason.
Well, thank you, Chairman. You've summarised the situation well, and I'll try to manoeuvre through the PERDA election rules, the Grenfell inquiry rules, and also the legal position as well. It is, as you said, and it's not just about Barbie School, of course, where they're building housing as well. It's that issue of trust and safety, trust that was mentioned earlier, and the Kingspan. It's not just because it's Kingspan. It's the fact that the Grenfell community and the campaigners and the bereaved families and survivors and some of the people that came out on the demonstration, and some people who just discovered this stuff the previous Saturday, they were of the opinion, and of course we were all of the opinion, that the council, because the council had effectively said so, were not going to be using any of the companies or any of the suppliers or materials that was used either at Grenfell or mentioned at the public inquiry. And of course, Kingspan was one of those. And as you say, the deputy leader did make a statement afterwards saying that, of course, he fully understand that this is it was an issue of safety and products, and that as of this morning, that was last Monday, any Kingspan products had been halted from that Barbie School site, apart from the stuff that had already been installed, and it was an underfloor system, not a cladding system, as it were. But I think the main point is that, and he did say that officers would be asked to order all of our new bills currently underway, because of course I'd written an email to the leader and deputy leader of the council on that Saturday before the Monday demonstration, when I was sent a picture and knew what was going to happen, to flag this up, because it is an issue of it's an issue of safety, and it's an issue of trust. I mean, the contractor who has been named in many emails, Mace Contractor, they're doing construction work at other places like at Hortensia, Middle Row, Silchester. The issue, of course, was that the council obviously had not prescribed any of the materials that they were using. And let's not forget that Kingspan were using, not that they were not using its material at Barbie, but they were using Kingspan K15 at Grenfell on the refurbishment, which was used as part of the flammable cladding system. And I'm reading now carefully from what's been publicly said on the Grenfell Tower. And phase one of the inquiry concluded that cladding put on the tower, which of course included Kingspan, and Kingspan say only 5%, put on the tower during the refurbishment period was a fuel that killed 72 residents and was a breach of the building regulations stated by Sir Martin Moore-Bick, the chairman himself. So whilst there's an issue about this particular site, no one who was not at the fire or who does not know bereaved families and survivors or has not listened to that dreadful evidence inquiry, it's probably hard to believe how distressed people with PTSD and trauma have when they see that sort of thing. And incidentally, they are combing the borough now, searching other sites, as it were. You can't imagine how horrifying it is. And you see some emails. We see many emails of them discussing this. I mean, I myself was horrified because I suffer severe PTSD and I have long periods of depression because of what happened at the fire. I was there on the morning, and we were all and quite a few of us were there, and it never leaves you, and it catches up with you, and you don't know what's happening till it's happened. So I feel like they do. I've cried with them, and we've all cried with them in various places. We know what happens when they come together in this sort of situation. It's emotional, and it's a trust issue.
Thank you.
No one believed, or they all hoped that the council had prescribed these companies at least until the end of the inquiry, till we found out who the inquiry and the Metropolitan Police later on thought who was guilty and who was not. Because of course the council has taken protective legal action against some companies who are involved in this, and it's I'm not sure if Kingspan is one of them, but it's quite likely that we may do, and we would be standing in court with Kingspan saying, well, if you thought we were so terrible, why were you using our material at Barby School? So it's an issue of safety. If there are companies that we are using, and we have many developments in Dalgano and Nottingdale and in Goulburn, we have no idea what they're using. And when we went to the site on Monday, and it wasn't just us, it was the campaigners, the builders laughed at us. They had no idea that they were standing in front of bereaved families and survivors, some of whom had lost multiple members of their families, and they laughed. And that caused, you were there, Chairman, you know how emotionally angry people got when they thought they were being laughed at because they kept saying, Grenfell is up the road, my family died, why are you laughing? So it's trust and safety. The council needs to produce that list. This damages the council's trust. Even I didn't want to be standing in another demonstration, as I said to the deputy leader who wrote what he wrote afterwards. I didn't want to be standing in another demonstration where the council was in the firing line, proving once again that the council can't be trusted to protect our residents or make changes and learn the lessons. And you know, I've been depressed ever since. So thank you for allowing me to say that, Chairman.
Yes, thank you. I would like to, I don't know, Councillor Linda Wade, if it's relevant to this point, make it brief if you don't mind, please.
Yes, I was just thinking there was Pat, Emma, Daniel Moyland and a number of other people were on a public realm scrutiny committee, which generated a report on procurement. And one of the things that came out of it was that actually lead members, officers had to be mindful of actually the tendering and the specification process. This was in conjunction with perhaps the BT contract, Holland Park School, where we failed to get the swimming pool. There were a whole load of different aspects. But when I read the tweets going around about the materials used, one about the sensitivity of the materials, but it actually showed a slight disconnect between the tendering and the specification, and what controls do the council have
over their contractors and the specification of materials used, given the sensitivities around where we are at the moment?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that relevant question. If I may call Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith, the Deputy Leader and the Lead Member for Housing, to comment on this and to update the Select Committee about any progress being done since last Monday.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I just start saying, obviously, you have highlighted the issues of PERDA, and I have to say that some of the comments that are being made and have been made, and are also on your political blog sites, are really very, very inaccurate. And I just really want to record that. I think I gave a very clear statement, having been to the school first thing on Monday morning, which I issued on Monday, and made it very clear that we would obviously look into this. You're absolutely right. First and foremost, this is about safety. It is about the safety of the school and ensuring that this school is as safe as it can be, because it is a school which is scheduled to open in 2 parts this year, and include the first SEN school that we have for 57 people who are scheduled to arrive. So absolutely important that we make sure that this is the safest as safe can be. I think the first point to have is to keep generalizing Kingspan and associating the school with flammable cladding is wrong. We shouldn't do that, because I made it very clear in my statement that the Kingspan product that is at the school is not the same product that was on Grenfell Tower. However, I think we just need to note that Kingspan is the elephant of the insulation industry. It's like calling it a Hoover and then referring to another vacuum cleaner as a Hoover as well, even though it's not a Hoover. I mean, they have extensive product. They are the market leader, and Kingspan product is throughout the UK. It will be throughout lots and lots of buildings and commercial buildings. As far as the school is concerned, the product that's been identified, which is Kingspan Green Guard, is a product which is put under concrete. And obviously, when we specified the specified for the building was specified for being the safest that it can be. And having specified it, we then put the sprinkler system in addition to the so again, I just want to reiterate that it is most important we do that. We've received a letter from GU this week, and understandably they're very upset on the fact that we are used a product from one of the suppliers that we've obviously listened to, and quite frankly listened to the most atrocious things that they have admitted to on the inquiry, should be supplying in any way anything on any council building. And what we've been asked to do is, and it's referred to in my letter already, is to conduct an audit on all projects that we've had post 2017 where a Kingspan product might have been used, and to ensure that if they have been used, that to ensure that they actually have been used in a safe way. And that's something which is underway. The second aspect that was referred to and called from us is to look at our policy with regard to both contractors and suppliers that have obviously been highlighted within the from the inquiry, and that is something that we have internally done on an informal basis because of issues in terms of procurement, and that's something which we are reviewing at the moment to see how far we can go. But it's fair to say that what we have done is we've ensured that as far as any new projects are concerned, then we ensure that we're not contracting with people that have been contractors or that have been involved in the inquiry, nor from suppliers. You know, but we do have some projects which, as has been indicated, which were started before the inquiry, which are in progress, that we need to do an audit on, and that we'll do as swiftly as possible. I mean, there are initial ones as far as we're concerned, ones were in progress as the housing projects is concerned. We're very confident on those. Things like Maxilla or the Grenfell Nursery, which are two new projects, I can confirm there's actually no Kingspan product at all involved in them. But we will give an update on it shortly, and we are working on it now to try and get to the bottom of the facts so we can give a proper statement rather than try to avoid speculation.
Thank you.
Just two final points. Chairman, can I make two final points? Firstly, it's amazing after 4 years the council didn't know what products were in there, and I mean, in any of these buildings, it's clear. I'm amazed. Even I'm amazed at that. We didn't know that Grenfell products, as it were, being used. And secondly, there are some experts that would say that the insulation material, and have said that the insulation material at the Barley School is flammable. I'm not an expert, but you can go online and have a look. So we don't know, the council didn't know, and I'm just utterly amazed that we could be putting flammable material in, or companies can put anything they like in, and we don't and didn't know and won't know till the audit is done. That's just incompetent. I'm sorry.
Pat, you're absolutely right to point out that you're not an expert. I'm not an expert, but we are taking expert advice. And in terms of flammable products are concerned, I mean, if we look at it simplistically, you have wooden desks in schools. That's a flammable project. I think the important thing is to look at the overall risk associated with the products, and that we are going to do.
Okay.
Very rigorously. And first and foremost, as I say, this is a concern for the school, and the school obviously wishing to ensure that any pupils that are coming to this wonderful school are absolutely safe.
Thank you. And on that note, I just want to come back to this point, and I think I have taken advice from the legal team, that's the council legal team, and officers, senior officers from governance, and I have been saying this as a bridger about the pre-election period and the border. And I think Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith, the deputy leader of the council and the lead member for housing, it's fair to say that calling the opposition or Councillor Kim as Councillor Pat Mason as the opposition leader, it is not break of the rules of the border period or the pre-election period. I had to call people on their titles, and it's not a problem. I don't think on this meeting there is something that has been done pre-election. Has been a break of the pre-election period. If there is, please point out now, and we will take it.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not making any suggestion. I was raising the point that you're right to point this out, because we have to be very careful in terms of the language that we're using, and I'm not making any other suggestion beyond that. Thank you.
And I did refer to that, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I just wanted that clarification. My final point to you is, Councillor Taylor-Smith, before we finish this meeting, we know the council gives us contracts. And this at this point, MICE, I think, has been given the contract, but they have used Kingspan as a subcontract. What system or what mechanism is in place now onwards that this won't happen again, and there will be a thorough investigation of how a contractor can give a subcontractor or to use a material or a company that is in question relating to the disaster we had this council has ever had?
Well, again, to answer your question, the MACE contract on the school specified a product. It didn't specify a supplier. It was a design and build product contract, and the contractor themselves chose the supplier, and that's something that we regret that wasn't picked up subsequently. Obviously, a year afterwards, when I think we first saw the attendance of and started to listen, or it might have been 2 years after that, that wasn't retrospectively spoken about. As far as in answer to your question, is that as part of the specification process, we do now request, insist rather than request, as far as any contracts are concerned, that there are suppliers that won't be used.
Many thanks indeed.
And that, just to be clear on that, that's Kingspan, Celotex, and Arconic.
Yeah, any company that's in question of Grenfell related, or as we have talked about during that morning on Monday last week, any dodgy company that we may think have in question about what has happened in the tower, of course the inquiry and the reports will come out, and that will tell us the point. On that note, I will leave it that comments there. Thank you, lead members, and for your time, and thank you, officers, and of course, thank you, select committee members, for taking the time and going through all the papers, and finally, the members of the public who've contributed to this meeting. And it's been challenging to make sure that we have to meet the requirement for the pre-election period, and we have successfully done that meeting. I'm sure you all agree on that, and I thank you for reframing all the sensitive questions about the elections and influencing the outcome of the election, which I'm sure we can't do that. But for the record, we did our very, very best to make sure that we don't use public money or public platform, council's platform to influence the outcome of the election. And once again, it's been a good, and we have a meeting coming up. This should have been the last scrutiny meeting for municipality for 2020-2021. But this selective committee, as ever, is hardworking, and we've come up with another meeting, and that meeting will be the last meeting for this municipality. That will be the 24th of May, and hopefully some of the points that we will be needing to cover, we will be talking about, and a full report of a work program, which I'm happy to say that we've covered more or less this difficult period, all our points. And finally, without leaving it behind, Tunde has mentioned that one of our officers is not feeling well. That is Sanjay. Sanjay, we wish you a speedy recovery, and I'm sure I can speak on behalf of the committee and every councillor sitting here that we will hopefully get you back and with get well soon, and a speedy recovery for you, and we wish you all the best. On that note, thank you very much, everyone, and we will meet again on the 24th of May, 2020, and have a wonderful evening to you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.